right.
Wow, it's nice to see where people are signing in from.
All right, very good. We are live on YouTube now too. So welcome everybody over on YouTube. Thank you for joining us here. And please put your name and location into the chat over on YouTube as well. So hi everybody. Welcome Sun Owl in Wilmington, North Carolina. Welcome Josie in Australia. Ellie in England. Welcome P. Witt in Minnesota. La Pierre in Montreal. Carrie in New Zealand. Welcome back, Carrie. Hi, Jolanda in Spain. Great to have you all here. And as everybody else is joining, welcome to you as well. Shannon in Mount Shasta. Christoph says, go LA. And somebody in Sweden, welcome. Will in Minnesota. Very nice.
Quickly
So,
over the planet.
oh, what did you say, Cater?
So it looks like we quickly cover the planet here.
Yes. Yes, we do our best. Welcome, Daria in Ireland. I know. So, Cater, just so you know, I've had a lot of internet issues today. I'm hoping we will not have a problem here, but if I drop out, just carry on and I'll be back as soon as
All
I
right.
can.
Well, we'll talk amongst ourselves while you're gone. That's fine.
Okay. It's happened a couple times. Didn't happen in the last one, so I have high hopes. Um, where Mercury retrograde starts in 6 days, so I guess it's already maybe beginning, but hopefully we'll be good. So, welcome once again, Cater. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us, and I'm really excited about your topic for today. And to begin here, I will share a little bit more about you and your work, just so everybody can get to know you in case they don't know you already. So, Cater Brown is the founder and director of Rites of Passage Council, an organization offering deep nature ceremonial encampments around the world. He is an internationally known ceremonialist, healer, intuitive, and teacher of psychological and spiritual awareness with over 35 years of professional experience. And I will just say I have participated in Cater's programs over the years, and it's always just really profound and life-changing to be a part of your work and everything you offer, Cater. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Yeah. So your topic today is the road ahead and the activation of your personal medicine through rites and rituals of healing and initiation. And so I was wondering if we could begin by just sharing a little bit about the recent events in Asheville, North Carolina, and you live just north of Asheville there. Such profound events have occurred there since, with Hurricane Helene. Could you share with us how you've seen people rising into leadership um, during those events, and anything else you'd like to say about what's been going on in Asheville?
Yeah, it's was quite an experience to be here and go through all of that in context of the broader community. Um, there I was thinking about three different quotes over the past 30 years that have stuck in my mind. And when I thought about the hurricane and watched how things unfolded, and even studied myself in relation to how I was responding, um, I remember this quote, old Irish proverb actually, that says, "It is in the shelter of each other that we live." And then another one that is I think more of an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. And what I noticed, in aftermath of a hurricane, where communication, um, resources for water, in many cases, actual physical safety, and the ability to go anywhere were all just gone. If you were able to go anywhere, you were fortunate, but there was no communication. You only had what water you might have had that night before. Um, and so you immediately start turning your attention to what I noticed for me, like what was close in. Where are the kids? Are they safe? Can they stay safe where they are? Can we get to them? What do they need? Like beginning close in. And then slowly, as we began to answer those and respond to those needs, the awareness and the expansion of care began to broaden out. Um, my partner and I don't live in a closed community or a neighborhood kind of area. We live out in the country on land, so we didn't have the immediate response of neighbors or things like that. Um, so it was just this immediate attention to those close in. And then, as I say, as time, then you start expanding out with the resources you have and who needs what. What I noticed in the wake of the hurricane, what brought me to tears over and over and over was not the atrocities of loss, which were tremendous, and property and life and all kind of things that were lost. It really was the generosity, the personal experience of generosity and kindness, that whatever divisions existed between belief systems, political ideations, all of those things that were a part of a huge pressure cooker, especially in the United States, um, vanished. There was none of that. Um, and um, what expecting this? um, yeah, just the the responsiveness of everybody just began. How are you? No matter where you were, like how are you was a real question. It wasn't just a passing thing you said in the grocery store. It was like you stopped, you checked in. Do you have what you need? Um, there's and I know there's still, like, in the wake of all that was lost, there's still this tsunami of grief that's sitting here. Like, when I turn my attention towards that grief, as you can see, it turns its attention towards me. And because you're holding so much, there's so much in the field um, to manage and respond to. But in terms of this conference and leadership, that, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it is in the shelter of each other that we live. It's like I saw that really come out. And I hoped it would last. I don't know how long that lasts, but I do know that that's at least here in this area. If things get really bad again, I know that that's the baseline that people here seem to go to is let's come together and how do we figure this thing out? Um, and so, with leadership, using that as a springboard into this conversation, leadership, not just from an individual perspective, I'll get to that. That's kind of, but in terms of what does the landscape, what is going on, what is required to navigate the landscape before us? And it is that will summon the kind of leader that will either uh, accelerate the breakdown of old systems, or if enough of that has happened, it will summon the kind of leader that is bringing and restoring, bringing us out of the ashes. Um, and there's that dependent on the landscape the one is in, and that's why I titled this "The Road Ahead." Because leadership is so much about looking ahead and defining, what's needed in this landscape before us. 25 years ago, I was walking into a YMCA, and they had this little fish bowl on the counter. For those that don't know what YMCA's are, they are like a health club. And there was a fish bowl on the counter that had all these little um, quotes written on pieces of paper where you just reach in and take one. And I reached in and pulled one out, and I read it. And it was a quote by Max Dupree. And it said, uh, the first responsibility of a leader is to define the road ahead. The last responsibility of a leader is to say thank you. And in between those two things, a leader is a servant. Um, in several days, I began reflecting on that little thing that I pulled out of the fishbowl 25 years ago in preparation for this. And I thought, that little quote says so much. How do we define the road ahead? It will determine what kind of leadership we summon. Um, if the road ahead is not defined in terms of a long road, the tendency is to find and call forth the kind of leaders that respond more to uh, immediate gratifications um, of our society. What kind of looks like it will address that which is most needed right now or most wanted right now, maybe not needed, but most wanted right now. And so the road ahead is not very far. That kind of leader doesn't look that far ahead because they create a response that is driven by, let's just answer the more immediate needs of what we see people asking for. If you define it further, the challenge is you'll lose the support of those people.
Mhm.
You go too far down the road. So, well, what we need to be aware of is these things 7 generations down the road, and the life we live now has to live in such a way so we're thinking about them, um, because that might require more difficult responsibilities now. Um, Definitely doesn't assist us in responding to those immediate gratifications. So one thing that calls forth leadership is again the landscape that we're in. And I would definitely say, and I would guess most people watching this conference of yours, based on what it addresses, is agreeing or understanding that we're in this um, uh, period of transition between what I call the old guard and the new story, or the old story and the new story. Um, and the old story is, to define it most broadly, a story of separation. Um, and it's a story of, and separation, there's that narrow reference of self or um, those more immediate. And I think the more crisis one feels, the more likely that kind of immediate response with separation occurs, or the forethought of how to answer these challenges is through the old paradigm of separation. Like, well, I'll take care of mine. We'll close the borders. We'll do this. We'll, um, turn our attention inward and in response to how to move ahead. So I think we're seeing that, but it's an old paradigm. It's not even, I mean, biology, physics, the sciences, um, all these different medicine, all these different paradigms of new thought that were based on the old ideas of Newtonian physics and separation. Those are, they're outdated. Although most of us still operate as if they were still going on. Like the old physics was still the rule of law, or the rule of perception. Um, but that's changing. And so we're in this period of transition, and uh, and so you see the extremes polarize. It's it's not a I see it all as a methodology toward the new, not as like, oh my God, this is horrible, this is the end. No, it's all evolving. As a friend of mine used to tell me, said, or she said, you can't not be on your path, no matter what you're doing.
Mhm.
So I see it as kind of the human evolution on this planet, that we created this polarized fields of perception and response, and we're going to cook in that for a while until those don't work, and they will break down eventually, and they will call for a third thing. Um, it's like everything is reflected in nature, and this is where I more of how I see things. Like there's a circular quality to the seasons. There's a movement that happens between the winter solstice and the return of light and warmth. and around February 1st, at least in the Celtic way of naming the wheel, Imbolc, where we think of the emergence in the spring, and then equinox, and then Beltane and the beginning of summer, and then around the wheel, this way that there's a cyclic organic movement that's happening that moves between birth and newness and activity and turning inward and into darkness again where we are now, and then the release and all of that cycle. And so everything moves in that way. It's I always think of nature as the blueprint of how we are. And so we're in this period evolutionary as our human evolution where we're transitioning between an old paradigm of separation um, toward the new paradigms. Those quotes I mentioned, they all kind of hold the new paradigm. It's like if we're going to go far, we have to go together. If you want to create the illusion of going fast, separate yourself. And so we're in that dynamic of struggle, even on national, international levels, of how to hold that energy. So it is interesting times in terms of what kind of leadership is called forth. Um, and to look at it mythologically rather than pathologically, which is one of my big shifts, is not don't look at this pathologically. It won't feel it'll feel horrible if you do.
Mhm.
Uh, it's like the word uh, can't think of the word right now, but this word of breaking down, um, it refers to awakening. So when we think of things are getting difficult, we're in this birth canal process of constriction and pressure. Um, so it calls forth a leadership that can help to navigate this territory of uncertainty. Um, and I think collectively, what we're seeing in my judgment is leadership called forth to help move us along the 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 um, the deconstruction phase.
Mhm.
um, and so I see it methodologically or as a methodology toward that ends. Uh, and and so knowing that, we know that we move, evolution moves from like awakening, performing, to eventual crisis, and then breakdown. And we're moving from crisis to breakdown at the moment. Um, and I don't want to get everybody all worked about, this is the end. That's not what's happening. It's just, it's birth pains. So um, again, leadership to be defined by how far down the road you're going to look will determine what kind of leader is going to be called forth and how wide of a net we're going to cast. Is it just us we're going to be concerned about, or is it, the planet, all species? Are we going to look just, you know, uh, to how to increase our, our money, our resources, or do we look further as far as how far down the road we're looking? So I just encourage people as they're thinking about leadership, consider those two things. How far down the road is this leader focused, and how wide of a net are they including? Um, and more importantly, not to get lost in all the spins of everything that goes on in news cycles, and um, encourage people to use a very informed critical analysis of anything they read or see. You know, give it 10 times as much time and energy to explore and study critically any issues that seem to be floating around on the surface.
Mhm.
Uh, we have this. A lot of people probably on these conferences are familiar with the term spiritual bypass, in which people use spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with the underlying issues of unresolved need deficits or traumas that they themselves may carry. So they tend to kind of spiritualize everything. Um, and then recently heard Charles Eisenstein flip that and use the word political bypass in the same context, to use broad sweeping political ideations as a way to avoid all of this underlying uh, challenges and traumas and things that are driving. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
and and uh, and then this idea that um, people believe that they inform themselves or based on their perceptions of what's happening is based on the information they're getting. When in reality, a deeper critical analysis would tell us that our perceptions are directed by unresolved needs or traumas that we carry. So what we perceive is already colored, and and then our response to that has more to do with our own unresolved needs than actually what's happening. Um, so where does leadership begin? True leadership. And now I want to bring it back to the person. This is more I was telling my partner Lana, I said, I think I'll just stay a little bit in my lane of expertise, which is more on rites of passage and ceremony. And there are many more people in the world can take you down those other roads we just talked about in great detail. Um, but the leadership that is most called for is the one in you, the one in you. Um, it's not something uh, that will benefit you to vicariously project onto another to carry for you, as entertainment likes to do with the hero's journey. That we often get these images of other figures that we can vicariously identify with their journey, um, and not really connect with our own. And here's the premise of this is that each of you out there watching this conversation um, came into this world carrying something very important that's needed here. Uh, don't judge it in terms of uh, what the culture says that it wants from you, um, or how big and how much impact it may have. Is all of it's important. So this idea, much more from an indigenous lens, that you come into this life carrying something that is very, very important to be delivered here. And and the rest of us need you to bring it. Um, and so right away, we're stepping outside these old paradigms of um, what I call the better and less than paradigm, where you're going to either be better than or less than somebody in what you do. And it's like, this is outside of that. In this way of thinking, you can't be better the same way you can't be less. You can simply be you or not be you. And we really need you to be you. And so how do you uncover that amidst all of the input of what society is asking of you or prescribing for you? Um, how do you uncover your own personal identity beneath all of these what I call the isms of society, all the different isms? Um, and it requires what the mythologies and ancient societies, ancient cultures tell us. It requires a period of dismantling of the old. Think of what we're going through globally as a human evolution. The individual is asked to go through on their own, which is uh, this period of what we call a rite of passage or a dissolution of the old story. Um, and so, in many contexts, the fasting, exposure, solitude, that kind of rite of passage that exists in every culture throughout history, that when one goes up on the mountain or into the desert or on walkabout, um, this idea of activating a memory of who you know and came here to be. Um, and awakening up that toward a life of purpose and action. No matter how, again, not to judge it and how big of an impact it may have. Um, you change one life, and that one life might change the world. So there's this idea of, in the rite of passage context, the calling. So what is a calling? A calling is something that summons you to a more um, authentic and remembered way of being. This summoning may be comfortable or it may not be comfortable. Depends on the situation. It can come through a crisis, through an illness, through it's something that stops the life you are living and stops who you are becoming while you are living it. To snag a phrase from a David White poem. To interrupt the life you are living and to interrupt who you are becoming while you live it. And that kind of pause. And so it's something that calls your attention away from the territory of the familiar. And it asks of you to cross a landscape of the unknown. There's not yet a new story. This is one we're in globally. There's no new story yet that's collective enough to take hold. So we're being asked to step onto this landscape, to step into this threshold period of uncertainty. It's as a phrase I have in one of my poems, says that you're called forward by some force that is unconcerned with the comforts of a life you have outgrown. Called forward by some force that is unconcerned with the comforts of a life you have outgrown. Or to snag a phrase from Carolyn May, she said, when you call on the will of heaven, heaven comes. However, heaven has no regard for your physical safety or comfort. It has regard for lining you up with who you came here to be. And that can be a bumpy process. So the calling is not one of sitting on a pillow with your legs crossed in a meditative place and all that, having this awakening to change your life. It can happen that way. More often it happens through challenge, darkness. So it's this understanding that great journeys begin in darkness. That's where they begin. It's the seeding ground, and the darkness summons of us a certain authentic vulnerability in the way that it asks us to apprentice ourselves to this darkness is only through this authentic vulnerability. And this is the birthing ground of true leadership. What I call true power with, not over, is this ground of vulnerability, ground of darkness, uncertainty. Somebody asked me not long ago, how do you know when somebody's there? And I say, well, the truest sign when I see somebody is there is they come to me and they sit down in front of me and with tears in their eyes, they say, I don't know what to do. It's like, okay, now we can begin. Your cup is empty. Because as long as you know something, then we have to wait a little bit long till you run out of your own intellectual resourcefulness. But once you reach the place of not knowing, now you're available to receive grace in whatever form it can come to you. And this was the design of these initiatory passages, was to put one into an experience guided by elders into a context of surrender, letting go, into an initiatory ordeal or breakdown, in which they, in order to make the crossing, had to reach out to something greater than themselves. And in a world where we have objectified most of our reality, in this object relations, psychologizing of everything kind of reality, um, oftentimes there doesn't seem to be anything that one can reach for beyond their own resourcefulness and intellect and rationale. Um, and even some of the paradigms of Eastern traditions that have us going up and out um, of the body uh, in a world where our physical body, certainly in this country, um, and the physical body of the planet is in such turmoil, don't believe that the need is to go up and out. I believe it's down and in. Ceremonially and ritually, we think of two initiatory trajectories of change. Um, One follows the path of water. Water goes down. Water uh, goes down, and in that context, uh, mythologically, down refers to the need for reconciliation and healing and ancestry and unresolved uh, issues and stories that one has to reconcile with in this initiatory descent. Um, and one needs navigational guides that have been down there to help them go down in there and come back without destroying themselves through depression or suicide. So the initiatory arc of water carries us down and in. Um, and then the initiatory arc of fire carries us up. It's I think I think we're on this downward arc of this need to reconcile, to heal. Um, and then once one does that kind of work, often what's found at the bottom, one of my favorite stories, the Nubian woman, often what's found at the bottom of that river is fire. And fire is an elemental uh, ally or ancestor, we could say, an elemental ancestor that awakens, inspires, directs, and carries one up. So to go through an initiation by fire, we say, is to be inspired, to be directed, to be on fire. Um, and for those that prefer to go into fire as their go-to response, as far as pursuit of some kind of activational energy, and they always go to fire, well, they're going to end up in the water. And those that go into the water, well, they're eventually going to end up in the fire. And so there is this dynamic or this paradigm or this circular nature of movement. That's why I say when it looks like things are falling apart, remember there is a methodology here that's happening. And um, it can be easy or hard depending on how we do it. Um, but we have to, it's like breath. Think if you only breathed in, how useful would that be? Um, you would expand, 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 expand. Or if you only breathe out, be a constriction. So there is this expansion constriction that the planet does, that we do as humans, that evolution of our consciousness does. Um, and so we're almost at the bottom of the out breath globally. Um, and then as we know in many uh, yogic practices, that place where there's the pause. That's the threshold. That's the in between the old story and the new story. You breathe out, there's a pause. And that pause in an individual life, can last a decade or two um, in terms of what's happening in there. But earlier we were talking about the calling. So this calling calls one forward into a life unconcerned with the comforts of the life you have outgrown. And it asks of you uh, to navigate a territory that's unfamiliar, and therefore the necessity to reach out to something uh, greater than yourself. Let's say greater than your own resourcefulness and thinking and strategic mind to move across this territory. And it also requires support, allies of one kind or another. Um, And there are certainly in many of these stories, there are often near-death experiences that one encounters. Um, and they often encounter what's called, in many stories, I like to call them gatekeepers. It's the one they encounter at the threshold between one paradigm and a new paradigm as a gatekeeper. And the role of a gatekeeper is to challenge the traveler with some kind of difficulty, a riddle, question, um, a task, a duel. Um, and if they get it right or bring back the right thing or respond in the right way, they get to pass. If they don't, then they don't pass. Um, and so I also see these gatekeepers as that's what we're facing now, our own gatekeepers to the new story.
Mhm.
What has to be reconciled? And so in that threshold phase, just like Jesus going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, Buddha going under the Bodhi tree, Crazy Horse going out into the desert. There's in that threshold phase, there are things to be reconciled, things we'll be challenged with. Um, and it does require this again, reaching out to something greater than ourselves. And there's a breakdown. Um, even if you think you know why you're going on this rite of passage quest, initiatory journey, even if you do it deliberately, there will still be a breakdown. Um, and the breakdown is necessary. Um, you can't arrive at a new story um, with the same strategic thinking and moving that you had before. So this breakdown that occurs opens one's heart of compassion. This now I'm going back thinking about the hurricane here and how in everything, all structures of normalcy were broken down. Um, what arose was this heart of compassion that carried a great deal of inclusion. Like we're going to get through this together. Um, and so as that shift starts to happen, a new story starts to form. Um, and then there's the returning, on the inner rite of passage, there's the return from the threshold, return from the solo, or return off the mountain or out of the desert. Um, Carrying this new sacred elixir or holy dance or ancient language or something that has been not acquired but remembered. And this is the part I was talking about earlier. In the individual life, these moments of initiatory transition um, as a ceremony were designed to activate the memory of who you came here to be. Um, and sometimes the return to is one may be returning to a life where they are so out of alignment with what they saw out there in the desert or discovered on the mountain, they return to a life that they really don't feel like they fit in. And then they spend the next several years trying to unravel that and make this life over here more like the one that was out there. And that can take, months, decades to make that transition happen. To say to begin to live your life as a ceremony is very different than going into a ceremony and leaving it. And so the return can be bumpy as well. I think the most dangerous uh, parts of this transition that we're in globally, that we're in um, individually, or that's we're being asked to with the different callings that are happening, is that getting to the desert, the mountain, and then returning. Um, uh, put a lot of people up on the mountain during these initiatory quests, and they always focus on those 4 days and nights. And I said, don't worry, that's the easiest part. And the hardest part is the fact that you got here. And then the next hardest part will be when you go back. Um, and so this return is how do you carry that back and begin to integrate this new story into your life, these new awarenesses, these new understandings about yourself, um, into a life uh, that the one you left behind. Um, and that can take some time. You know, that's what I call the great giveaway is how you live your life following these great disruptions and initiatory passages, is the giveaway that follows. So a leadership, you know, in that one quote by Max Dupree, when he said the responsibility of the leader is to define the road ahead. I took that one part of it and said, defining your road ahead is a very important thing to do. If you're not initiated into the bone memory, into the mythology of your own life, you will likely be leading an existence that's not entirely your own. And the life you know you must live will be standing just a few paces in front of you, looking back over its shoulder with its eyes wide, waiting for you to remember that one.
Mhm.
And so this idea of apprenticing yourself to yourself, and activating those memories of awakening. Um, and so this to define the road ahead first for you individually. What is yours to pick up and do? And not get distracted or off course by others' opinions or society's directives about what will work best for you in this culture. In other words, what will make the most money or make you the most comfortable. Um, you know, sometimes that it works out for people to choose those directives because it fits, and other times it doesn't. Um, but defining what does the road ahead look like, and how far are you looking? One of the things now at 65 myself, and I always believe of having for people should have elders in their life at least 15 to 20 years down the road, help remind them to not take themselves too seriously where they are because they have the longer view. You know, it's one of my um, mother-in-law statements is like in her mid to upper 80s. She says, you know, take the long view here. Remember this. It's like, oh yeah, when I take the long view, this is not as challenging as it appears right now. Um, and so this concept of uh, informing your life by awakening, uh, what is it that's yours to carry? And then beginning to align your life with doing so. Um, doesn't mean it will be easy, but it will mean it will be yours. Um, and then beginning to walk that. And the thing is about leadership is when you do that, there are others that you'll discover will be just a few paces behind you. And um, you can turn and you know offer something of guidance, um, just as the ones ahead of you offered guidance. Um, so being a leader, I think first and foremost has to do with how you're living your own life and are you aligned with the life um, that is, feels like the one you are to be living. Um, and how are you navigating that? Um, what are the uh, non-negotiables? You know, I tell people you get to you get to decide what's non-negotiable as you navigate down this path that you've chosen. Um, if everything's up for negotiation, then it all might be lost, and that's just how it goes. Um, and if it's not, then you have a certain way you're willing to move forward. So this first awakening to be a leader in your own life. What is it that you value? Do you live within the riverbanks of your own integrity that guides that value system? Um, and that I think is first and foremost. Um, then, if it is that you are to be a leader of others, that'll reveal itself. Um, in terms of, um, I mean, it's easy to be a leader of others in many ways. I don't want to say it has to be groups of people because you can lead just with a comment. Um, but leadership will the times you're in will call forth what it needs from you. And if you're living into your own medicine, as I call it, um, then you draw upon what is within you to bring to that time, that moment. Um, the other part of the quote, it says the first responsibility of the leader is to define the road ahead, which we were just speaking about. The second, the last is to say thank you, and between the leader is a servant. And there is the other thing, a servant to what? Um, what is one in service to? And in this lies a much bigger question. Is it the more immediate needs of gratification that are dictated often by unresolved traumas or unresolved needs? Um, or is what one is in service to something much further down the road? What if you were in service to your great grandchildren? You know, what kind of life would you be leading then? Uh, Years ago, I used to work in a recovery center, a wilderness recovery center, and I'd have these young men I would be working with, and sometimes I'd give them this task. I'd say, I want this week when you're out hiking around the woods and doing what you're doing with your group, I want you to consider someone you respect very much. And they would come up with somebody and say, now I want you to imagine that that person's walking with you throughout this entire week.
Mhm.
Who would you be now? Um, so is definitely informed by who we put around us and what we feed into our own awareness. Um, you know, what are we in service to? Is it greater than ourselves? That's the big, you know, always the big thing is that to be in service to something greater than your own personal needs um, as a leader. And then the last responsibility of the leader is it says to say thank you, which really denotes that you are only that it was quite an honor to be of service. Um, so those few things always speak to me of what are some real basic qualities of leadership. Um, as I say, the times will call forth the leaders that are needed to uh, move the paradigm along. And if we're in a paradigm shift of deconstruction, the times will call forth leaders that will um, facilitate that breakdown. Um, and and so that's kind of what I see happening a lot these days. And so could we argue that these are not the right leaders for us? Well, yes, not immediate, not according to more individual desires or wants or preferences for the long story, the global story, the evolutionary story way down the road. But are they the right leaders for this moment to help with this deconstruction? Now, that could be arguable from that perspective. I said, well, yeah, it would certainly speed that process up. Um, so I'm curious to pause here and hear from you, Jocelyn, anything that's stirring in terms of a give and take, or even people out there that may have
Yeah.
questions or comments.
Thank you, Kedar, for all of this wisdom. It's been really beautiful to take this in, just receive what you're sharing here. Um, I definitely welcome everybody to ask questions in the chat if you would like, both on Zoom and on YouTube. And yeah, I think it's so I love that context of the type of leadership, whether we're looking at just what does everybody want right now versus what do the next 7 generations need. And of course, then, as you were saying, that's going to lead to very different decision making very different outlook on what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think it seems really clear. We've had a lot of short-term decision making for the last few hundred years, and especially recently. Um, and the other way than looking ahead to our great grandchildren or our next 7 generations is very much in line with the indigenous perspective and these wisdom traditions that have lasted a long time, and that obviously that's why they've lasted so long. So thank you for that. Is there anything else that you want to say about that, Kedar? It seems really important to consider.
The yeah, when I kept reflecting on leadership, I kept running into those same two constructs of what holds it. And it's like, well, how far down the road are we looking, and who are we including in this? Those two questions define everything. Because if we're not looking far, and we're not including many outside of, you know, certain group or country or people, um, then the definition of leadership will be in response to what is more immediately being asked for by the masses, you know. Um, and if I look further than that, down the road in terms of how far we plan in this leadership to be effective, um, then, at some point, the immediate needs and desires of the masses you lose them. Um, because like with the hurricane, um, what it created was safety needs, and there are many people operating that level of survival. They're not thinking, and they don't need to be thinking about the next 7 generations. They're in a survival state, so their survival needs are like, what's immediate? How do I get what I need right now to feed my children this week, or to maintain these 3 jobs I'm trying to hold. Um, and so that you know that their response to that is going to be more immediate. um, and they can navigate that. um, but for those that are holding the reins of more collective movements, group consciousness and group movements, you can, if you it's still important to look far down the road, um, and set things in place that will carry us far. But how do we attend to this way? There's that way down the road, and then there's how many are we including? Um, and those the old sayings around if you want to go fast, you can go fast, but you're going to be going more on your own. But if you want to go far, we have to go together, and that's going to be slower. Um, so evolutionary awakening on global consciousness is not a rapid thing. It's evolutionarily, it takes a minute for
Yeah.
those things to shift.
Yeah.
um, and the only thing that, in my judgment, would be rapid about it if there was mass breakdown, and then we go into a period of quite disruptive challenge before something new came out of that. And so it's almost like we're trying to temper the speed and the amount of breakdown we encounter, but there's no preventing it.
Mhm.
Um, you ever come to have the experience? I'm sure everybody does. Where something seems to have been, it's come to an end, and you don't want it to end. And so we hold on, but the holding on doesn't make it not end.
Mhm.
Um, it actually makes it much more difficult, painful of an ending process.
Yeah.
Um, and and those are things, that's a lot of what's being asked for, is both, I know, astrologically, of what's shifting and moving, and also global, and the evolution of humanity is like, but these endings are birth pains. Let's not get lost in it's the end that's over. Um, they're part of what's necessary for a new story. And so, how do we what is being called of us in this transitionary period? What do I have, me, that I can bring to this?
Mhm.
Um, and what will be in service to uh, all peoples, uh, not just human peoples. Um, and I think that's the other shift is around the tendency to psychologize everything as a pinnacle of reality and understanding. Psychology hasn't been around that long to hold such power, and well, since I've been studying all my life as a therapist, and moved away from that being the pinnacle of understanding, um, this slow movement toward relational, interactive uh, connection, not just with ourselves as humans. That's needed, but with everything. And so and I don't speak this from any kind of woo-woo, dismissive response, but there is this turning towards what actually would be more reflective of normative consciousness if we look at the evolution of consciousness, which actually is more a state of animism. And by animism, what I mean more is this way of being relationally involved with all that is around us. We're not separate. If those of you out there that have gardens know this, those of you that tend to animals or have pets know this. If you spend any time in nature, you've seen this. Um, there is a relational connection um, that requires a certain reciprocity of responsibility. Um, and I've seen this so many times uh, in doing different ceremonies or rituals out in nature when we will have these very unique encounters with either elements at very precise moments or animals at very precise moments. And people sometimes say, why is it that animals tend to like they come in close? Um, and the only thing I've gathered from that is think, well, when you're in ceremony, when you're in ritual, you become recognizable to them and you're no longer a threat because
Mhm.
you're in a state of consciousness that is not perpetually spinning your mind about some story of past or future or anxiety. You are totally present, interactively and relationally engaged in the moment. And so when you're in those states of awareness, animals come in, just seen it. They'll just walk right in to the circle, show up in interesting ways. Um, and so we know through studies in physics with what talk morphogenic fields, holographic realities, all these new concepts of science that speak to these realities. Um, that as we begin to align ourselves with even the new sciences and new biologies, um, it requires us to understand that we are in deeper relationship to all that is around us. Um, and there is a communication that's happening, whether you intend it or don't intend it. Um, and once you learn to align yourself and if you have the opportunity to go sit in nature for a long enough period of time so that nature wakes up after you no longer feel like a threat, you may be surprised at what bird lands on your head or a squirrel run across your lap or deer walk up in front of you and or snake comes over the cross. All kind of things can happen because you're in a different state. Um, and so there is this slow turning towards an old, much larger paradigm of reality, which is much more animistic than a more of an object relations kind of psychology dynamic of separation. Um, and the turning is slow. The turning, most of the stories of Many of the ancient stories of different religious systems speak of the separation, and how those things occurred, and you can see them in the stories. Everything from the Garden of Eden and Cain and Abel and all those biblical stories of separation. Um, but that old Irish proverb is, it is in the shelter of each other that we're going to live, um, is not just referring to the humans.
Mm.
Um, Matter of fact, if the humans don't get on board with what that really is speaking to, they're the ones that may not. Everything else probably will make it. We're just one of many species here. Um, and so this return to a more animistic way of understanding and relating with the world around us invites what I call relational reciprocity of respect. Um, and that's part of the big shift that we're being asked of. It's the return of connection.
Mhm.
And so this idea of the breath in, the breath out, um, connection, disconnection. Not one's not bad, one's not good. They're just moving. The tendency to polarize them and see one is wrong and one is bad. It's the ability to see them as, well, this is a cyclic pattern of evolution. It's kind of coming together and spiraling apart. The same way uh, the movement of an individual human cell in the body, it's like a spiral, as does a entire galaxy.
Mhm.
Space spirals. Um, Same thing. It's like everything is going to do this, and it's going to spiral this way, and then it's going to spiral this way. Um, and so the other big change that I tend to preach a lot is this change from um, the old paradigm is not only focused on the better and less than thinking, but it's also focused on uh, what I call acquisitions and arrivals. And that is the illusion that there will be, eventually, there'll be some place you arrive at, that relationship, that new job, or these are more acquisitions, to acquire this relationship or this job or this thing, and then all will be well. And say the bands will play and the confetti will fall out of the sky, and it will all be, and it will be there. Or that you'll arrive somewhere that if you could just get to this place in life, then it will be well. And so this grand illusion that we're chasing these arrivals and acquisitions as if then my life will begin and be okay. And it's like, no, this is your life now. There is no one place to arrive at, no one thing to get that's going to make it all change. And that's not to say it's not, it is very important to have goals and visions and to pursue those. Um, but to be caught in this constant paradigm of arrivals and acquisitions and better and less than thinking about yourself is what keeps that whole thing spinning.
Mhm.
It's crashing. Um, and then the new paradigm, well, if there's nothing to really acquire or arrive at, even though I do like having goals and visions and pursuing them, but it's not about getting there. It's more about this thing where people keep saying, well, it's the journey. Well, what does that mean? What it really means is that pay attention right now. What's in front of you? Who's in front of you? And you look in the mirror and actually see yourself looking back. Um, are you presence? Can you presence yourself to yourself and see who shows up in the mirror? Um, my Cherokee teacher, Will Rocking many years said, the job of the mind is not to run your life. It is simply to record information and give it back to you when you need it, or to strategize a plan of action for something you may see coming down the road. But if you're not doing one of those two things, the mind should not be active. What should be active is your awareness and attention to the moment. Um, Years ago, Joseph Campbell said, and I definitely agree with this, that people are not seeking a meaning for life, even if they think they are. Meaning, as if somehow there's this fixed construct or meaning that once you have it, again, that's the thing you'll get, and it'll all be make sense. And saying that meaning is fluid. It's like a river. You're not going to capture it. It's going to move. It's going to change. Um, but this idea, people are not in need of a meaning for life. What they're really seeking is an experience of being alive. And this is what has been lost in this pursuit of the acquisitions, the arrivals, addictions, obsessions, compulsions are all uh, well meaning, but poor substitutes for a true experience of aliveness. And the experience of aliveness comes only from a true experience of aliveness comes from the ability to presence yourself to the moment that is before you, be it with your child, laughing, playing, you know, that whole experience, or with a friend who's dying and the grief and being, lovingly present and in it with them as much as you can, or even the willingness to feel and look out on the planet and see some of the most atrocities that are happening to humans and to the environment and feel them, be present to them. Not comfortable. Being present to an experience of liveness doesn't mean comfort necessarily, although it often does. But it does mean aliveness. And so we have developed kind of this numbing reality, and then this poor substitutes for searching for um, the experience of being alive through these other mechanisms of things moving faster in order to stimulate us. Everything's moving faster. I was I was surprised when text messages got shorthanded, where you have these shorthand levels. Like, wait a minute, I thought that was fast enough. Now you got little things, and now you just get a little emoji, and that's the most you get. But all this, like everything's faster, 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 faster.
Uh-huh.
And connection technology is actually creating more disconnection than connection because we're trying to speed up. And the reason we're speeding up is because if you slow down, you're going to start to feel, and things are going to start to wake up. Um, and so we have to be willing to deal with those gatekeepers in order to be able to restore our sense of being able to presence ourselves simply to ourselves. When you can do that, and it takes time, but when you can do that, um, entering into that relational, animistic, perceiving reality that's right there. I saw a question up here, so I'm going to
Yeah,
catch
there's a
myself down this
few.
rabbit hole.
There's thank you for that, Cater. I think that is so important. That what we're really looking for is the experience of aliveness, not to reach some goal or goals that are always extending out into the future. So thank you for that. There's a few good questions here. We are getting near the end of our interview time, so I think maybe we can do one question.
I'll see if I can get them all. Maybe I'll do it'll be a miracle, but I'll try and talk briefly.
Well, here's one. Um, Here's an interesting one from Will. He says, it strikes me that we need to reevaluate our relationship to time, and this is kind of what you were just talking about, as a driving priority due to the fact that everything moves too fast to maintain a sense of balance and groundedness, not to mention the needs of our children that didn't get met because of the demands of time. What do you think about this as something to look at on the road ahead?
Great question, Will. What comes to my mind immediately is when evaluating anything, you want to look at the construct that holds it. So we're going to go way out first and then come back to time, which is, of course, there is no time. And I don't want to, again, sound woo-woo as if that answers anything, but time only exists when you have 2 points in space, and then now time exists. But once that's removed, then time, like all of the time, is all of a sudden available. So realize that we're not a slave to time; we're the creators of it. And so, how do you If we have these agreed upon understandings that we're going to operate within these time-space dimensions of work and childcare and school and all these things that we operate within, um, then give yourself moments outside of that. And this is to break out of that. Uh, if you have, children are really good for helping us do this, unless they're crying and screaming at night, and that's a whole nother experience. But that will take you out of time too. But is the concept of time something that we're feel a slave to, or can we create containers where we have to actually use time to drop into no time? And what I mean by that, set up a time or on a consistent basis where you have periods of time that you put a boundary around where you can drop into not tracking it, and you'll know you're there when you're totally present, when you're not thinking, when you can reach the place where you're not thinking about anything. You're just completely present in the moment with what's in front of you. Um, and that will break that spell that time has. And in those moments, you can all of a sudden come out of them and think, wow, it feels like I've been here like 3 hours and it was only like 2 minutes. Or the reverse, wow, it feels like I was here just 2 minutes and 3 hours went by. Um, and that's the more reality of the time, is that you are to not be a slave to it, but to use it. In a more practical sense, if you have kids, create time with them to where it's not going to be pushed in on anything, or with a friend, or you can be totally present. Being totally present is the solution to the time dilemma, because when we're in that time catch, our attention and our mind is never where we are. It is always somewhere else, um, and that's part of how you disrupt that feeling like a slave to the time thing. What else?
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, Isia, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Isia says, how can one recognize or distinguish one's calling amidst the general telemarketing of the world? That's a good way of putting it.
Yes, that is the very challenge. That is the challenge. You're asking a question that millions have. Um, First, to shut off all of the other input, telling you who you should be and how you should be. Now, so much of it has been programmed in there. If we lived even a little bit of time on the planet since we arrived, so much already gets programmed in there, based on the cultural, not the culture, more of the modern society's myths of who we should be and how we should be. And they always say, if you want to know what the society's myths are, just look around and see what the tallest buildings are, and that will be the common mythology of your area. Because it used to be the tallest things were the trees and the mountains. And then we did construct things, we constructed centers of the sacred in some way. So the sacred centers were then the tallest things. Um, and now the tallest things are centers of commerce.
Mhm.
And, so then the myths of the culture inform you of how to be based on the values. And so to kind of get through all of that, that's what I say, how do you get rid of all of that? And that's the essence of the rite of passage, to sever yourself. That's the question, I'll say, Fasi is how you say your name, but that's the question of somebody on the brink of a calling. That question you ask, because it tells me something's starting to summon you uh, into an awakening, that's going to first require a severance from all these paradigms of telemarketing and input from the world, calling your attention. And so the severance means you have to quiet all that. If you can't do it in a deep period of time, at least take um, periods of time where you can go into a park or go into nature and start breaking the spell um, of its attachment to your mind and to your thoughts. Um, if you want to get really clear about something, first you have to get confused, and then the next step is um, quiet. Find a way to quiet that external input, um, and stay there long enough. Stay in the not knowing place. And this is the other thing that people tend to want to, speaking of the time thing, back to Will's question, the thing that people want to speed up is the discomfort of the not knowing. But remember, once you know, you've eliminated all other possibilities of what could be. So when you shed yourself of all this other input that's telling you who to be and how to be, allow yourself to be in that place long enough so that knowing is something that finds you, not something you seek after. It's not another thing to acquire. It's not another thing to learn. It's not another thing to, you know, I want to say acquisitions and destinations, not another destination. It's something that will find you. Um, and it's not immediate. So that's why you give it, and it may be some discomfort as you shed those old voices and unplug. Um, but allow the discomfort, allow it to come and go. It's just like weather passing. And eventually, you'll meet a gatekeeper that often has to do with emotions or memories or things that haven't been reconciled. It's part of what fuels that other stuff. And you will have some time reconciling that and being with that. And then as you move to the other side of that, you'll feel an emptiness in a good way, a spaciousness, a presencing yourself to whatever's there with you. And then slowly, sunrise will come and a slow illumination and hints of remembering will start to happen of who you are. Um, so I hope that's helpful.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. I want to make sure, and Isaiah said, thank you, brother. So
Sure.
it's like that was helpful. Uh, I want to make sure that we share with everybody, Kedar, your free gift. So your free gift that you're offering to everybody is an audio called Singing Stone. Would you like to say a few words about that? And I'll put that link in the chat.
Yeah, it's a story of the initiatory journey um, that I'm telling, accompanied by my djembe drum that's sitting over here beside me. So together, we will tell you a story called Singing Stone of the initiatory journey. And it speaks of this process of remembering,
Mhm.
talking about here.
Yes. Thank you so much for that free gift. And it's a really it will take you on quite a journey, this story. So hope everybody will enjoy that. And I also want to mention to everybody, and maybe you can explain a little more fully, Cater, that you are we are raising donations for Rites of Passage Council because of some of the destruction of the hurricane and things that need to be rebuilt, as well as projects that you're doing to.
Well, I lost you. This is that moment that Jocelyn warned us about. So, and she told me to keep talking if she went offline. So I'm going to keep talking with you. And I'll watch the clock, Jocelyn, so we don't go too far. So yeah, what Jocelyn is referring there is as a nonprofit, Rites of Passage Council is a nonprofit organization, and typically we gather funds to help with scholarships and to help administrative needs. In the wake of the hurricane, we decided to make priority um, responses to the needs of the hurricane. Some of those on the lands of Rites of Passage Council um, that was needed for cleanup along the river. Um, and I think I'm still on. Yes, looks like I'm still on. I'm going to keep talking here. Make sure, yes. All the people seem to still be there. Um, and then also, we created a program for first responders since they were so tremendous in assisting our area. It was just, I can't believe how yeah, I just feel so grateful for all the first responders. And so we created a weekend program for first responders to assist them in dealing with the kind of traumatic experiences they had simply in doing their jobs to help our communities. Um, and so those are some of the things where we shifted our donation needs. So in our general donations around scholarships and administrative needs and land improvement needs for the around Rites of Passage Council to more of the hurricane response. And there'll be a something that Jocelyn's going to put out there. Um, so let's see. Any other? I know we're coming right up when we got 5 minutes. You're welcome, Catherine. I'm staring at the chat box since Jocelyn has disappeared. And is there another co-host to this with you, with Jocelyn, that was in the background reading the chats? Maybe not. Um, so in closing, see if I can, I want to share a poem with you about leadership. And bear with me just a minute because I'm going to go find it on my computer since I'm not that all that organized as far as having this ready to read. Um, poems. Where are you? Okay. So I'm going to read a poem to you by Arnold Mendel. I'll call it The Leader. And I call it The Elder. That's it. Or he calls it The Elder. I just want to read this from you by Arnold Mendel. It speaks of leadership and it speaks of eldering. And I think that the true responsibility of a leader is to get other people to become elders. In that light, here's the poem by Arnold Mendel that we'll close with. The leader follows Robert's rules of order. The elder obeys the spirit. The leader sees trouble and tries to stop it. The elder sees troublemaker as a possible teacher. The leader strives to be honest. The elder tries to show truth in everything. The democratic leader supports democracy, and the elder does this too, but also listens to dictators and ghosts. Leaders try to be better at their jobs. Elders try to get others to become elders. Leaders try to be wise. Elders have no minds of their own. They follow the events of nature. The leader needs time to reflect. The elder takes only a moment to notice what is happening. The leader knows, and the elder learns. The leader tries to act, and the elder lets things be. The leader needs a strategy, and the elder studies the moment. The leader follows a plan, and the elder honors the direction of a mysterious and unknown river. So that's I'm going to share that in closing and bring us to an end here. So I invite, I'm going to turn off the recording and wish you all well and safe journeys. And I look forward to seeing you all down the road. If you're interested in other work that we do, ritesofpassagecouncil.org. So it's RITES of Passage Council, ritesofpassagecouncil.org is our website. And I know for some of you, and it looks like in Spain and over in Mount Shasta, I know we have some stuff happening in those areas next year. Um, so, love and blessings to you all. And I'm going to end the recording here. You go well. All right. So now we're still on here, but the recording is paused. And you're welcome. You're welcome. I don't know if we're still on the other channels as far as YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff. Maybe Jocelyn responded when okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the call here, folks. And again, I look forward to hopefully seeing you sitting around the